Testing, testing. Hello. We will begin shortly. Just trying to set everything up here. Let's see here. Okay. Okay, let's see. Just get the stuff all set up here. Hello, Jeremy. Hopefully things are working better. I got no technical problems. All right, looks good. Cool. I'll just try to set a few things up. Let's see here. Swan. And so I'm gonna miss that one. I don't know where that's at. Roads list. And then down, and then live looks good. Okay, just give me one more minute, and we'll get there. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that. Let me just set it up. Resilience. Part. The dreamer. Oh no. Trees. Yeah, we're just gonna do this. Yep, and that's what we're gonna do. Okay, and then I'm gonna loop. Set up a loop. No. Okay. Okay. Now the only thing I need to do is make sure my dog is fed. And just feed my dog right quick and I'll be right back. Okay. Welcome everyone to the Black Ponderer. This is. Can I unpin this, please? Let's see. Unpin. Okay. Yes, welcome to the Black Ponderer. This is a YouTube channel where we talk about philosophy. I'm the host of the channel. My name is Neil. Hello. How's it going? And yep, so regularly we talk about philosophical texts, you know, from modern day texts, from living philosophers to old school philosophers that have long since passed away, like, you know, Aristotle, Plato, Immanuel Kant, all those, Rene Descartes, to, you know, living philosophers like Judith Butler and Angela Davis and all the contemporary philosophers. But, you know, we also do these live streams, and in the live streams we just pick a topic and we just talk about it. Today's topic was suggested by a viewer, and the viewers are on chatting on the chat right now, and that's cool. And yeah, last time we had some technical difficulties, but I think I worked it out. I think. We'll see. We'll see if we worked it out or not. And I'm also using this microphone. This is this is my daughter's microphone. She gave it to me, and it should sound a little better, but I gotta hold it really close to my mouth for it to pick up the signal. So I don't know how that'll be. Might just we'll see how that works. if the sound quality is better than the look of me holding it close to me, but whatever. So yeah, we're talking about cultural appropriation, and yeah, we got some people in the chat. So hello, and you're saying live looks good. Yep, I saw that. Why do you think there's no line between appropriation and appreciation? Oh, I think I said there is no fine line. Let me see here. Let's see what I said. I asked the description of this live stream. It says, is there a thin line between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation? Not really. Also, please let me know if there's problems with the audio levels. That would be cool if you want to let me know that. And if it's all good, then no worries. There's a line, but is there a thin line? Some people will say, like, well, you know, it's a very thin line between like appropriating and appreciating, and I don't know about that. Right? That's what I said. The line is there, but I think it's a fat ass line. It's a very thick line. So we can talk about that. Capitalizing on the culture of a marginalized group of people is quite different from appreciating. That's a typo. From appreciating that culture. Okay, let me correct that typo. Cultural appropriation is often accidental. That can happen. It can be an accident, but that doesn't mean it's excusable. Let's discuss how and why. Yeah. Damn, I still don't. Okay, I'm still kind of lagging a little bit. Save. But we'll keep rolling. Okay. Sorry, I'm just looking at my internet bars, and it's still suffering a little bit. Let me see here, but I think I'm good. I need to set it to like ultra low latency. Do I do that? Let me cancel. Go to save. Okay, that's the best I can do. Go in there. It is on ultra low latency. Okay. That's as good as it's gonna get. Okay. So why do I think? So yeah, I do think there's a line, but there's not a thin line. So like you said before, I think there must be nuances in dealing with diverse cultures. Yeah. That's true. I can get behind that. And then you say, I enjoy reading and studying about various cultures in the world. Does that make me an appropriator or an appreciator? It makes you an appreciator. Nothing wrong with studying different cultures. That's good. It's a good thing to do that. Most people don't understand beautiful and fascinating cultures, and they should learn about them to evolve. Yeah, I mean, learning about different cultures can help you become a better person. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I think you could read and study cultures, and that's not appropriating at all. That's very clear. It's very clear. Nothing wrong with that. The world is too globalized to avoid learning and practicing cultures, in my opinion. Yeah, you just can't avoid it. Well, I mean, people do and can. They can and do. Globalization doesn't stop many people from doing that. But it's good to do it. Can marginalized groups learn and make money off of dominant cultures in reverse, though? So can marginalized people learn and make money off of dominant cultures in reverse? Absolutely, right? That's like when selling out. That happens all the time, right? When you're immigrants and you're kind of pressured, and sometimes that's pressured against your will, right, to do that. Right, you kind of have to conform or adopt the the dominant culture, and you have to oftentimes marginalized people have to are forced to adopt like white heteronormative ways of being, patriarchal ways of being, and that's how they avoid a lot of discrimination, right, and make money. But I don't know if that's, well, I guess it's a kind of appropriation, but it's not like an appropriation that is exploitative, right? It's actually like helping the dominant culture by doing that, right? There's a concept in anthropology called, oh, hello, Joseph Irvin, called diffusion, where certain life ways are observed, adopted, and adapted by neighboring cultures. Is this cultural appropriation? Probably not. Hello, Sam Man. Is sampling in music cultural appropriation? Well, it depends. It all depends on what's going on, what's happening. All right. I mean, an obvious example of cultural appropriation, right, is I used to go to music festivals a lot, right? I used to. Now I just don't really have the time to do it. I would still love to, but I just don't have the time. But it's very popular in music. I used to go to Coachella back in the days when Coachella wasn't as big. And, you would see the people walking around with the indigenous Native American headdresses, right? These people didn't know anything about the indigenous culture, where they were taking these headdresses and putting them on their heads. And they'd even do these half-ass derivative native, trying to dance trying to copy some sort of indigenous dance or something like that. You'd see that all the time at music festivals, right? And that was considered no problem. But I mean, that's a cultural appropriation. Why? Because for many reasons, right? First of all, you're just doing it as a fashion statement. You have no idea what the culture is, and these people didn't have any idea where they were taking which culture they, which tribe or nation, indigenous nation they were doing. They were just like, oh, I'm just gonna wear some generic feathers on my head that looks like some idea of what I think an indigenous culture should be, and I'm just gonna dance around like I'm, it's kind of insulting too. A lot of time, and then I would say, so the issue is like, well, I'm showing that I like the way it looks, so shouldn't you be, you should be happy that I enjoy the way you look. But it's like, you don't know anything about that culture. A lot of those headdresses, for example, and this is a prime example, right? Those headdresses were reserved for people who of a certain title or a certain role in the culture. So they weren't, these headdresses, not everybody is suitable to wear them. You gotta be of a certain role or a certain title, right? It's similar. It would be similar to how, like, if you were to walk around with a degree from Yale University, you were saying like, look, I got a degree from Yale University. I got a PhD from Yale, right? But you didn't actually earn the PhD. Like, you didn't actually like take any classes, or you just was walking around with a PhD degree. Just, you've falsified it, and then you just, was walking around with it, but you didn't take any classes or like do any tests or anything, right? I mean, it's the same thing like that, right? And so, I mean, that's an example of when you appropriate, is when you have really no idea, like, the context of where you're taking the culture from, like, and then you kind of don't, and that implies you don't have any respect for the culture, and then you're gaining from doing it. So in that way, you're exerting a form of dominance. You're kind of exerting your dominance over the culture, because you're benefiting from taking somebody's culture out of context, right? You're reinforcing your dominance, right? And that in turn makes the marginalized person, the person you're ripping you're ripping the culture away from. You're making them less, their position, their socioeconomic status less, because they have no control over how you're exhibiting their culture, right? So so it's just bad in all types of ways. But let me look at some more comments here. The term sellout is a convoluted term because it suggests that a minority doesn't love and value its heritage, when it may not be true at all. Does it? Does it make that kind of suggestion? Trying to think. I'm trying to put some thought into that. I don't know if it necessarily does suggest that the minority doesn't love or value their heritage. It just means like, well, I'll keep going with some. I'll give that a think and move on to the next comment. And the Salmon writes, I think the weight of appropriation is heavier when the person has more power and influence than some random individual. Is it more powerful when it's like does the effect of a cultural appropriation, is it higher when there's like a person with more social economic power than it is in less? So yeah, let's bring back to that example of just some random white dude is wearing a headdress and doing some knockoff rain dance at Coachella. Is that not as powerful of an effect as if like a corporation was just took the headdresses and started selling them for profit. I don't know. I kind of think like both of those things would have a equal negative effect. But I don't. Because it just going back to that example. I remember they stopped doing it because people were starting to call the organization out on it. Coachella was like, hey, you guys can't just be letting people do that, right? And then it was bad press, so they kind of stopped because they'd have their photographers, the industry for just take pictures of them and just showcase them on their website, right? But they stopped, and those are just random people, but they were like, it was making their culture a joke, and it was like kind of reinforcing the notion that like indigenous culture doesn't really matter, as it's like a scene or some sort of like, it's not really a culture that it's more of a fascist statement than a culture, and that takes but ultimately what that does is it delegitimizes the culture, right? And it reinforces just the white patriarch, white supremacist ways of thinking, like, oh, we can just do whatever the hell we want with any culture willy-nilly. And I think random people was definitely like having that effect. So I don't know about that either. And then I know Black American singers like Whitney Houston were considered sellouts, but she was culturally Black and raised in the church. Yeah, I know. I don't think Whitney Houston sold out. I think sometimes that. You gotta. It's interesting, right? Because they're like, we have these terms, and some people will be like, well, you can't use those terms because they're. But just because somebody doesn't use the term correctly doesn't mean the term is useful. I think there is a such thing as somebody selling out, but I think people who are accused of selling out are falsely accused. All right, so so what does that? You really have to think it through. You can't just be, when somebody says, "Oh, you're a sellout," you have to be like, "Well, is this person really a sellout?" Because there are people who do sell out. Right? That is true, but a lot of people who are accused of being sellouts are actually not. Like Whitney Houston was definitely not a sellout. She was accused of being a sellout. Absolutely. I'm actually a huge Whitney Houston fan for the music. I like her music a lot. But she was not a sellout. But I don't think she ever did that. She never like conformed to some she never did any type of white conformity. A lot of white people liked her and they liked the way she sang, right? But she wasn't like, she used a lot of her Black culture to sing a lot of those ballads that were traditionally only in the realm of white musicians. She basically just took that. She's like, I could do this. I could do it. Like the Dolly Parton song, for instance, "I Will Always Love You." She Blackified it, which is the thing, right? That's the thing. I think she's falsely accused of that. But I see where you're going. It's like, you should, there's this school of thought where people say like, oh, you shouldn't use terms because people are falsely accused. But I think you should, but you have to be you gotta be careful. But more, you just gotta think it critically. You gotta be critical about it. Like when somebody's accused of that, you gotta be like, well, are they really what you're accusing them of, or are they not? I would say for her, no, that's not the case. Your example of the headdresses makes me think of the exploitation of stereotypes or characters in popular culture. Yeah. And another example of that is, we got the Pride Month right now. Pride Month, right? And we could talk ad nauseum about how a queer culture is appropriated, right? You definitely see these parallels now. Is it funny? I see queer culture, and it's like, man, there's so many people now just like taking queer culture and just like exploiting it and not really really thinking deeply, or like understanding like what queer culture really means, or how it's really influenced human society in so many beneficial ways. But they just kind of taking this superficial understanding of queer culture, kind of running with it, which is sad, and you're starting to see that, and that it's very similar to how Black culture has been appropriated, and then you start having these false understandings of like, because it's the same thing with Black culture. People will appropriate Black culture and they'll be like, oh no, actually this is good because we're accepting Black culture and we're actually being more inclusive. It's like, no, you're just taking a shallow, superficial understanding that's really just a joke, right? And you're just you're not giving Black people their due, and you're not paying you're not you're using culture to prop up yourself, but you're not like actually paying it forward to the people that you're taking it from. And you're seeing that with queer culture, and because it's like, oh no, we accept LGBTQ plus people, and it's great. It's like, yeah, but do you though? I mean, we still seeing all these hate crimes and all this transphobia. It is like, you're selling products and you're making money off of this, but are you actually like making the world safer and more inclusive and welcoming for like LGBTQ plus people? Like, yeah, and also please let me know about if the levels are jacked, if the audio levels are bad, or if I'm lagging, or what have you. Hopefully everything's good, but we'll just have to wait and see. Like the musicians on stage started wearing the headdresses than the audience. Okay. Yeah, that happened. Is that? Yeah, some. And, a lot of, like, particularly white male musicians will just appropriate things, and then that gives... And see, this is the issue, right? It's like, so it is true, like, sometimes you like what somebody was saying before was, oh yeah, that your sandband, you're saying like people who have more power, socioeconomic power, will do things which will enable others, like a popular person will do something and then now give others license to do it. Yeah, that's definitely true, but I definitely wouldn't downplay or say that just people who aren't as popular, who don't have a lot of fame or money, they could do that stuff and cause a lot of damage too. And then Jeremy says, I'm sorry, Neil, but Clive Davis deliberately marketed Houston to white people's taste, and Al Sharpton was the one who accused her of being white publicly. Well, I mean, Al Sharpton is cool. Like, he's cool, but he also has holes and flaws. Like, Al Sharpton isn't always correct as well. Al Sharpton sometimes he's in the wrong sometimes, but he's not. Al Sharpton's doing a great, because he's going to he's meeting a lot of the families of people who've been victims of police brutality, like that. Here in Memphis we had Tyree Nichols, who was like killed by cops innocently, and Al Sharpton did come over here and gave the eulogy, and that was great. Like he does that, but sometimes he can go a little. I would say Al Sharpton sometimes kind of conforms to white culture a little too much, to be honest with you. He's not perfect. And your producer, Clive Davis. Producers are not like a representative of the singer, right? The music industry is a big business, right? And sometimes, singers are victims of the music industry, right? They have to like kind of conform. Yeah, I'm not saying Whitney Houston is perfect. I mean, if anybody has seen her, I mean, all you gotta do is watch her reality TV show with Bobby Brown and say like, oh, okay, she got problems too. But she has problems. But I don't know. I wouldn't say just because her producers catered her to a white audience, that doesn't mean she herself sold out. I think she was like doing her job, and she was giving an excellent performance, and she was singing great songs, and the company that she sold the songs for marketed her, which she didn't really have much control over. Right? Because whether it was gospel music or like pop music, I mean, it was top tier music. Right. So yeah, maybe it is a case that her music label sold her out. Right. Maybe that's what happened. I don't even know if that's true. Right. I don't think she sold out. Right. And yeah, I definitely wouldn't say like Al Sharpton is like the golden standard, like to say like, oh, Al Sharpton said that, so therefore it must be true. It's like, wow, I'll hold the phone, because sometimes he be saying some crazy shit too. But overall, Al Sharpton's cool. He's cool. Okay, he wasn't a producer, but he was the head. He was the head. He was an executive. Right, and you gotta watch out for those executives, right? Right. I mean, honestly, that might be even worse, because he's a businessman, and so he just seeing it from the business perspective. And nowadays we have like indie artists and bedroom pop artists where you could just go to like an electronic music store and just buy like you get microphones like this and just make music in your bedroom. But in Whitney Houston's day, like, that was like, it wasn't, the industry wasn't like that. You had to go through the business to make music like that. So she was a lot more subject to that cutthroat business atmosphere. And, that really messed her up. That was part of that, her being subject to the music industry at that time, which was very cutthroat. That contributed a lot to the negative impacts of her mental health, right? So right. So we could talk further about why is there like not a thin line? Why? I think it's pretty clear what is cultural appropriation, what's not. But I think sometimes we like to give this sense or this idea like, oh, it's fuzzy. It's like, it's hard to distinguish. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. But Jeremy says Hollywood is not an industry that represents cultures well anyway. Is it? It's not? I don't know. I think Hollywood is I think Hollywood does represent a certain aspect of culture very well. I mean, it's not, oftentimes it's not a good aspect of the culture. Sometimes it is, though. Sometimes it is. But I think Hollywood represents that glamour that we culturally idolize. Hollywood, and we talk about Hollywood, we're talking about like mainstream media, particularly like blockbuster films. Like you look at the blockbuster films, you're like, oh, okay, this is what society deems generally to be like, what it values. And then you say Hollywood is an industry that destroys intellect and it's narrow-minded. Yeah. It's kind of hard to argue with that. But a lot of people do watch those Hollywood films, right? A lot of people really go and watch like those Hollywood movies, like what is it? Pretty Things. I think that was like one of that movie that like got a lot of like Oscar awards or something like that. Pretty Things. I saw like 20 minutes of it and I'm like, yeah, I'm done. I'm done with this. It's a very typical Hollywood movie, and it's so like just reinforcing that same ass patriarchal tropes. I'm like, I'm done. So yeah, no, it's true. Like, yeah, Hollywood movies they're not like the most creative movies, but just because they're not that intellectual doesn't mean they don't communicate like popular ideas about culture, because they definitely do, right? Yeah, so do you know that Hollywood is basically founded by Jews like Louis B. Mayer and Sam Goldwyn? Does that make Hollywood a representation of Jewish culture? Well, no, but Jews are part of America. That's what is American? When you look at America, like America is multicultural, and that includes Jewish culture. So America has Jewish culture, has Black culture, it has like all different kinds of Asian cultures. So yeah, I mean, is that a representation of Jewish culture? Well, it's not a representation of all Jewish culture, right? But there is some Jewish culture there, right? I mean, you can't really make like generalizations like that, right? Because America is so like multifaceted, right? So Hollywood, I mean, it's multicultural. Like, and just because somebody started it doesn't mean they represent all of it, right? There's plenty of things that started from something, but now they're like completely different, or like, they still have a seed of where it started from. That's still there, but there's all this other parts that came later, right? That reflect what it's about too, right? So it's not as simple as that, right? And then you say Hollywood often propagates negative messages about minorities. Yeah, that's damn true. That's damn true. But that's America, is it not? Is that not American culture? Propagating negative messages about minorities? I would argue that is American culture, which is sad. It's very sad, but it's true. It's not, I mean, just look at the American news. All right. It's not a good place to explore and express diverse cultures. No, I agree with that. But my argument is, it's not a good place to explore diverse cultures, but it is a place that reflects significant aspects of culture. And a lot of that is negative. It's not all good. And then you say, as a melting pot America is, we cannot see the cultures being representative of other cultures. Culture is it's a very complicated and complex and multifaceted thing. Like when we, for example, we say, let's look at Black culture, right? Black culture. What is Black culture, right? Well, I mean that's huge, because I mean not only are we talking about like, you know, the early culture that comes from like enslaved Africans that were brought over to America, right? And there's all types of different African cultures, right? And they're all different, right? And then there's just, you know, a lot of African American culture, which is like, you know, a lot of that is detached from African cultures, right? But that comes into mix too, right? And then there's all the Black cultures that are from like other parts of the world, like Latin America, right? And the Caribbean. So it gets very complicated, right? So when we say like something like Black culture, is like, it's hard to distill that to one or even a few things. It's very diverse, right? And then and you say American Chinese culture is not the same as traditional Chinese cultures at all. Well, I wouldn't say at all, right? Right. I mean, there are some similarities, but there are significant differences. Absolutely, that's true. That's true. There are some significant. I mean, I know that because I have many friends who are Chinese Americans. Uh-oh. I logged out. I logged out, but I'm back, I think. I think I'm back. Okay. I think we're back. I guess that's just something we just have to deal with. I think it is better, the connection, but as long as it just happens occasionally, I think we're okay. Yeah, so I was saying that some of my best friends are Chinese Americans, right? And they definitely share a lot of, I mean, they still do a lot of cultural practices from China. You know, they carry that over to from China to America, right? Now, you know, they also have a lot of American things that they do in America that is not done in China. But, you know, there definitely are influences from China that Chinese Americans incorporate, right, in their culture. So it's definitely not the case that they're not the same at all, right? But they're not the same completely. That's true. So do you think old movies about Native Americans, Black people, Italians, Chinese, etc. were accurate? Oh no, that's not what I'm saying at all. But what I will say is, I think old movies about Native Americans, Black people, Italians, Chinese, they are a reflection of American culture. Are like, you know, old movies about Black people, right? You can watch those movies and it will tell you a lot about American culture, not only back then, but today, right? Same thing with Native Americans, you know, cowboys and John Wayne, right? And that whole bullshit. I'm not saying it's good. And also it's not telling you, it's not giving you an accurate representation of the cultures of indigenous and people of color, but it is giving you a lot about the discrimination of these people in this country, right? Which is a real thing, right? And it's showing you how a significant way the dominant society viewed those cultures, right? Which is important to understand, right? And that is a cultural thing, right? And by looking at these things, right, we can learn a lot about why culture is the way it is today, right? Why we're still dealing with a lot of patriarchal crap in our society today, a lot of racist shit, right, that we deal with. A lot of times people, it's amazing. They'll look at society today. It's like, why is racism still a thing? Like, why is sexism still a thing? What's going on? Like, it's 2024. I would encourage those people to look at, seriously, like critically look at some of those old movies, right? Look at those old films. They'll tell you a lot. They'll tell you a lot about like, oh, okay. Because a lot of those old ass ideas have been carried over to today. People don't want to admit that. They don't want to confront that, but it's true, right? And I'm all about that, right? I'm all about like confronting the harsh truth. But that's just me. Right. And then Jeremy says, what similarities between cultures in America and the other world? What do you mean? What similarities between cultures in America and the other world? I'm gonna have to apologize because I don't really understand that question. I would say, what similarities between cultures in America and the other world? Well, I mean, I would just say that, yeah, like I was saying before, like, if you look at, Asian Americans, for instance, they've carried over cultural practices from the countries that they immigrated from, right? And they have and now that has become part of American culture. And it's the same thing with like Latinx Americans, right? They've carried over cultural practices from their parts where they immigrated from. It's kind of like the banjo. Let me take it out. Let me take this out. Let me give an example. So you have the banjo, right? The banjo is actually is an African instrument. It's from Africa, right? It was brought over by enslaved Africans. It was like they played a similar instrument to this, and then when they were brought over to America, they recreated it into the banjo. It's an African instrument. However, it was co-opted. It was appropriated by white culture, and it was put into a lot of genres of music that are considered off limits to anybody other than white people, like bluegrass, right, or Americana, or a lot of folk music, right? The banjo is used in a lot of that, and now it's like completely, a lot of people look at the banjo and they'll immediately think like white hillbilly or like southern white guy, right? But actually, like, the banjo, it has deep African roots, right? And not only that, a lot of black people have always played the banjo in America, right? When enslaved Africans recreated the banjo from a similar instrument they played in Africa, they would play it, and they made all types of songs, and their own folk music, and their own music that sounded very similar to like the music they played in Africa. And there's a long and rich history of that, right? And it's interesting because if you're really gonna study the banjo, which is quite fascinating, like the history of the banjo, if you look at American history from the early days, when enslaved Africans were brought over, and then you had indentured servants were also brought over, who were from Ireland, right, and Scottish people, right. and they used the fiddle, right? And so a lot of that, like early, like Americana, or like what would eventually become bluegrass, was music that was shared with indigenous servants and enslaved Africans, like Irish indigenous servants and enslaved Africans. So they had solidarity through this kind of music, this using these instruments. Then the people in power, like people who were like the slave owners and the big businesses, they pushed the idea of race into the American culture, and so that kind of ripped apart, because Irish people began like, oh, I'm part of this thing called white people, and it detached. So they started to disassociate from their status with African enslaved Africans, right? And because they were both like indigenous servants, right? Indentured servants. I'm sorry, indigenous. Was I saying indigenous? Indentured servants, right? But that music, like the folk tradition and the folk and Americana and bluegrass, you see the history of that. You can see the history of that, and so that in that way, like cultures, cultures from that. So that's how America is multifaceted. It isn't just like people from other parts of the world immigrating to America, right? It isn't just a melting pot, but it's also the process of the melting, right? It's the process of the integrating, and it's the melding of the two cultures. It's the I don't know if I would say it's the evolving of the culture, but it's like the mixing, and it's the progression of like the circumstances and how the culture changes by interacting with other cultures, right? The banjo is like a very American instrument in that way. How it's like, how it was like it is a great example of cultural appropriation, right? Because it's originally an African instrument, but it was co-opted, appropriated by white culture, American culture. However, despite that, you still can hear the African origins of it, because of that solidarity between indentured servants who were like Europeans and like enslaved Africans, right? It's quite fascinating. But that's America. That's America, baby. And America is like filled with those kinds of stories of like cultural like mixings, and like dealing with discrimination and oppression, and like the classes, the clashes between like race and class, right? And like gender and sex and things like that. It's quite fascinating. And then you say, this is why it's necessary to travel, because we can just think that all cultures are what we see on TV and film. Yeah, we can't. That's true. Yeah, you're definitely seeing, like you're saying, like with the a lot of that John Wayne shit, the westerns, where the cowboys and engines, like that's just some mythos. Like it didn't go down like that. So it's good to actually study like indigenous cultures, American cultures, right? To learn about that. But I guess my point is you don't want to dismiss all that John Wayne crap down out flat, because you can learn a lot about what America is by watching those movies. And I think that's kind of the problem today, is that we try to like not think about that, or we try to like phase it out and say it's like, oh, this has nothing to do with America today, or like this is not what America is. Like, no, that's what America is. And if we like kind of you know, understand that, it's shameful, it's embarrassing, and it's it's sad. But once we get, reconcile with that, then we could be like, okay, let's not do this anymore. Let's not fall into that kind of trap. Right? Let's accept that we did all this fucked up shit as a culture, and like try and not repeat that, right? Because we're just repeating the same shit over and over again. It's quite sad, right? Because we're choosing to like not acknowledge like the negative aspects of our culture, right? And then Jeremy said, it's ironic that with all the multiculturalism, many white people historically hate diversity. Is it ironic? It's sad, but it makes sense, right? Because a lot of white people profit off of white supremacy. Like they literally make money off of it. So like so hating diversity is a profit motive. Like it's like you get financial benefit from hating diversity. So it makes sense. But you got to push back and say like, well, what's more important? Like humanity or like your pocketbook? Right? I would argue like humanity, but that's really what you want to talk about. And then you say the WASP establishment surely created a lot of hatred between ethnic groups. Okay. I don't even know what that is, but cool. Batshaft. Hello, Batshaft. Love the work you do, my friend. Just today I was playing some Africando in the car with my partner, and she brought up how it sounds like Latin music. I never thought about it before. Right, it's just culture. It is very multifaceted. So when we talk about cultural appropriation, we have to acknowledge like the diversity and like the multifaceted nature of the cultural appropriation. I'm thinking about Pride Month, because we had we're having our Pride parade here in Memphis, Tennessee, and you talk about like queer culture, right? And so what is queer culture? Again, like that's so vast. It's like such a vast, because you're talking about gay culture, you're talking about lesbian culture, you're talking about transgender culture, you're talking about asexual culture. It just keeps going and going and going. And all of these things have, all the things I just talked about have really deep, influences. And it's interesting thinking about like how influential people who do not fall in the heteronormative category, like how influential all those people, how much of an impact they've had on this world, and how much of our culture has been shaped by in very positive ways by people who are like, who are queer or gay or lesbian or transgender or non-binary or gender non-conforming, and it's just throughout history, right? It's not a new phenomena, and that's a part of pride. I mean, I'm saying this as a cishet dude, a heteronormative guy, but just speaking the truth, right? And then, why do you think European immigrants had tensions against each other in America with all the loving melting pot then? Oh, it's because of white supremacy. I mean, a lot of crap could be boiled down to white supremacy, right? It's this attachment to like the concept of race and white people being better than others. And people in power like capitalists and people with a lot of money and a lot of power and a lot of property, they pushed all those ideas on like working class people and poor people, just so that they can make their fortunes. And so a lot, that's why that's where the tensions come from. It doesn't make sense to hate diversity for profit if majority population don't hate minorities. It doesn't make sense to hate diversity for profit. Yeah, but we live in if the majority population don't. Yeah. So we live in a minority rule. Like a minority of people have the most power in the world, right? So it makes sense to those people, the people who are actually profiting. It makes sense to them. But yeah, most people don't have most of the power in this world. So you always got to look at things from like a social economic or like a political point of view. Like you can't separate the politics out of like anything, right? Because once you begin to think about the political situation of anything, then things start to make sense. A lot of times we look at things and we're like, why is this happening? And all you really have to do is start thinking about the politics of it. Then it starts to start making sense. It's like, oh, okay, what this thing that I thought was absurd or nonsensical, now it's like, oh, I get it. It's like, it usually boils down to like these few people are getting super rich off of this, and that's why this is happening. So you always gotta think like that. WASP is white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. Oh, okay. Jeremy says, I'm just looking at myself with this microphone up. I got this mouth absorber thing. Was I? Yeah. Oh, sorry. I shouldn't be tapping the mic like that. I'm probably making annoying noises. Sorry. But I got it up on top of my face. I gotta learn how to hold it. But okay, I don't need to hold it that close. I see. Okay. This is the first time I'm using this microphone. I guess eventually I gotta get like a microphone stand. And then you're saying, oh, okay. Oh, okay. I see some comments were retracted, which is fine. You got me. The melting pot was not at all positive. It was created to strip off diverse European cultures to conform to the dominant Protestant culture in the 20th century. The melting pot? Well, some of it was positive, but I mean, some of the melding, some of the mixings of culture wasn't just conforming, right? Some of it was great. A lot of it was conforming, and that's what we're talking about, selling out, right? Stripping off diverse, yeah. I mean, a lot of it was selling out for sure, but not all of it was. I mean, I would argue, like, for example, the Harlem Renaissance with Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington. That was definitely a melting pot. The American music genre that is jazz is a melting pot. It is a result of cultures melting together. And that was great. that was great. Yeah, it's hard to like say anything is. I mean, there are some things that are completely bad, but there's many things. It's hard to make that kind of like sweeping generalization like that, but some things you can know. But a lot of that melting pots stuff was good. And then you're saying, my point is, if America was a tolerant and accepting melting pot, then white supremacy should never had a place in the country. Yep. 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 No, I agree with that one. And then CE. Hello, CE. I got nothing to add. Just love watching your lives every Sunday morning and doing chores. It's chill. Wow, it's morning. So glad I found your channel. Well, thanks for being here. I'm glad it's morning. It's nighttime here. Yeah, it's nighttime here. Hey, you must be on the other side of the planet or something. That's cool. Okay. Yeah, and so like I guess my final thing would be sometimes we can accidentally appropriate. That does happen when you're like you wear certain clothes or you do a certain practice and somebody calls you out and you say like, hey, that's not you're appropriating. I used another example, but I remember that was when we had technical difficulties, so nobody heard me. But I didn't remember why. I mean, witch is something in witchcraft, which I think it's like budging or. Oh yeah, I forgot. Is that it? Oh yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I forgot what it was called. But I know, I know several people who are they practice witchcraft, which is hey, that's a cultural thing too. I don't really know much about it, but I've been told people say like, yeah, I cast spells. I'm like, okay, cool, good on you. But there's this practice in witchcraft where you bundle a bunch of plant life together. I think it's like budgeting or I forgot what I was trying to look it up and I just could not find the name. But it's something very. I've seen it a lot. I think it's not too uncommon, right? People like will tie a bunch of plants together and burn it, and then they'll just kind of distribute the smoke around the place. It's not like it's like burning incense, but it's like magical. It's like a popular thing in witchcraft, but apparently that's a cultural appropriation. That's something like indigenous Americans, certain indigenous American tribes did, and it was co-opted by like white people started doing that. And so like I've been told like, yeah, you shouldn't do that. Like you should or if you're gonna do that, you should definitely like consult like witches from indigenous people about how that should be done, or if you even can do that, because you really don't understand like the processes involved and like the what it means and like the implications of it. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's another example. And so, but that was, I mentioned that because it was a lot of that was accidental, right? But so because it was, so the question is, well, it's accidental, so I didn't appropriate. It's like, no, you still appropriate, and now you gotta like correct yourself. Just correct yourself before you wreck yourself. You gotta be like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. Let me not do that, and I can do something else. That's equivalent, or like I can research this heavily and see like something, talk to witches who do that kind of thing and see if it's okay for me to do that, and see if like I can do something else that does the same effect. You're just doing your research, you're showing respect, and you're doing your due diligence, right? And so again, what I say like is so because some people say, well, that's a fine line because you're actually like you didn't know, or you're showing your respect because you're actually like you like, because some people be like, well, I didn't offend you because I like doing this. That's not think I logged out again. Let's see. But I think I'm back. Okay, I think I'm back. Excellent condition, that's what it says. Okay, and then there's some more comments. What happened to Irish, Italians, and of course blacks reflect the evil white supremacy that shouldn't happen? Oh, that's not a question. What happened to Irish? Okay, got it. How do you think the melting pot process happened despite the well-documented ethnic and racial discriminations? That's a question. Oh, it's like, how I described. I told like how I was describing the banjo, for instance. It happens like that, or it's like, it's all like it's this very complicated, complex convergence of oppression, discrimination, joy, happiness, collaboration. Competition. It's just complicated, man. How do you think jazz was able to integrate during Jim Crow era? Oh, because white people liked it, and they, there's so much history that's written now about that during the Jim Crow. There's a new book coming out that's about jazz musicians during that era it's a book that's highlighting like civil rights activism through jazz. I was listening to an interview of the guy that wrote it. It's coming out soon. But a lot of jazz musicians played in white only clubs. Right, but they would have to go through. They have to enter through the kitchen, because black people weren't allowed to go through the front door of these establishments, right? But they still, white people still liked listening to it, right? So they would play these high established, like segregated places. But then there was other jazz musicians that would play in black establishments, and then there was also the establishments that were mixed. Now, if you really get into the history of that, you'll start learning about how a lot of white people would like undercover go to a lot of these black establishments, and there'd be like this interracial celebration going on that was not allowed, but it was happening, right? And that was both really cool but also problematic, right? Because white culture is benefiting but also not addressing the problem of the Jim Crow segregation. So that's how it was happening. It was happening in all those various ways. So basically what I'm saying, like the questions you're asking, like they're complicated. But I'm here. I'll get into it. But there's like 500-page books that have been written that answer your questions. Like how is jazz integrated in America? That's a long ass. That would not just take me one stream. That would take me like a series of like 20 streams. That's like a Ken Burns documentary. You know how Ken Burns makes documentaries that are like 10 hours long? It's like that. But yeah, just to show you, like, culture in America is like, well, I guess culture everywhere is, it's complicated. But particularly in America, because there's so many convergence going on here. And then you say, when I think of multiculturalism, I think of full-on, no discrimination of interactions between cultures. Right. But I guess my question is, is that a thing that actually happens in reality? Like, is that something that actually has occurred ever in human history? And not to be proud or be like, not to be proud of that. That's a shame on us as a human species. But when different cultures merge together, there's always going to be some discrimination, because that's just the societies that we live in are exploitative. Yes, it definitely occurred. Oh, okay. I'm not aware of. I'm not aware. I mean, some people will bring up, back in the day when the Library of Alexandria, and when the Middle East, when algebra was first made, and it's like, dude, that was like discrimination happening then too. Like, first of all, slavery was like a thing, right, in those days, right? I mean, people had slaves and stuff. There was like, women were objects back then. I mean, has that really changed? Yeah, I mean, it has, but yeah. So it's like, I don't know. You would need to give me an example of that. Which, not saying there's not. I'm just not aware of one. Yeah, right. A lot of people will bring up those examples. Like, oh, what about Egypt or Mesopotamia, North Africa? Right? They'll say that kind of stuff, like during that time of like the Library of Alexandria. But no, there was definitely discrimination happening. Right? Absolutely, there was. Right? I mean, you could just read books during that time. I mean, it was a great time of cultural melding for sure. But like I said, like, slavery was a thing, right? Which is like inherently discriminatory. Like, women were property, were considered, and that was like, at least now, like, that's challenged, right? That's like, well, we have like feminism, even though like, sexism is still alive and well. But back then it was like, that just was not even a thing. I'm sure there's people like pushing feminist ideas back then, probably. But I mean, was that the dominant like what culture at that time? Yeah. When Egypt had women's rights? Oh, okay. I'll take your word for that with some skepticism. Feel free to like message me like later on, some like sources that kind of show that. I would love to read them. I'd love to read that. But yeah. But that's another thing. Sometimes we do idolize the past in that way. We're like, well, it kind of reminds me of how sometimes, people will. I try to be careful. I don't want to say anything too offensive, but it reminds me of like people who idolize like African cultures, like post like when the slave trade was going on, and it was like, yeah, but African cultures were, and like, you do realize like African tribes were at war, and the losers of that war were the African tribes that won those wars sold their prisoners to European colonizers, right? So it wasn't like Africa was this utopia. It wasn't like Black Panther. Like, it wasn't like that. It was some really horrible shit going on. I mean, Zulu was like, he was a very violent leader, right? And that's not to like take any, not to take any, not to excuse like European colonialism, which also was horrible, and manifest destiny, that was bad. That was absolutely bad. But sometimes people like to look at past or indigenous cultures and say like, oh, it was so great, people lived in harmony back then. Yeah, no, it's just humans were, but they were like, but don't make but the other mistake you don't want to make is to say like, oh, it was just hell on earth all the time. It's like, no, like there were some great like egalitarian cultures that were going on, but there were still some problems, and I don't think any culture was exempt from forms of discrimination and oppression. But I'm not an anthropologist, so but I am friends with some, so I don't know. Yeah, they have yet to explain one to me. This is about idol. I always have problems saying that word. Idolizing. It's about pointing the hypocrisy and exploitation of American culture and its false acceptance of tolerance of multiple cultures. Yeah, like I said, like talking about the past and talking about other cultures in honest ways doesn't excuse the problems of our current society and the society that we live in. Absolutely not. Like we could say like past cultures were problematic, and also say like current societies and cultures are problematic as well. Like we could do that. One doesn't excuse the other, right? Or doesn't exempt the other. That's true. Right. But I'm definitely with you about like American culture is it's like filled with potholes and problems, and but then you have to ask like, what is American culture? Right? That's a huge question, and with an enormous answer. Right? It's very it's quite varied, and honestly it's quite diverse. White Americans don't know and understand Europe. There are no real European cultures. Well, some white Americans understand Europe. like not all white Americans are ignorant. Many are, but I mean, a lot of black Americans don't understand Europe. I mean, shit. I mean, a lot of Europeans don't understand Europe. I mean, shit. But a lot do. I mean, it does our society, does American society understand the nuances of Europe? No. But I would say that's not something that is exclusive to America. Right? Yeah, I would say people within Europe they struggle with that too. Just like people in America don't really understand American, like a lot of the nuances of America, which honestly is understandable because America is so diverse. We got like 50 states. We got different, we're a country of immigrants. We don't even like acknowledge as a culture like the indigenous people that lived here. We want to ignore the 400 years of slavery of black people. And I always mention here in the state that I live in, Tennessee, books are banned in schools that are about racial history and queer history. literally they ban these books, which is like, okay. And then we wonder why like nobody understands anything, right? So you're true. I mean, that's kind of true, but not all. Some Americans are. We know what's up. We know it's some white Americans know what's up. I married a white American that she's not an expert in Europe, but she understands those kinds of nuances. What makes you say that Europeans don't know anything about Europe and the world? Well, it depends. Again, we don't want to make mass generalizations like that. I'm really against generalizations. I'm sure I'm sure there's plenty of Europeans that like understand the nuances of Europe and like all of the countries, and diverse aspects of various countries. But I'm a gamer. I play games online, and I talk to Europeans, and a lot of European people I talk to who are from England, for instance, or like Germany, right? Which is these are people aren't reflective of all British people or all German people, but a lot of these people are like, wow, you don't know anything about like, they'll say things like, English is the dominant language of Europe, and it's like, huh? And the Europeans, they'll say things like that, or they'll say like, oh, nobody speaks Spanish in Europe, and it's like, yeah, but you have a country is literally called Spain, so what are you talking about? Right? People like that are like, I mean, there's ignorant people in all parts of the world. Right? So, and that's what makes me say. I guess what makes me say this is that I don't like making massive generalizations like that. I think there is a huge epidemic of cultural ignorance, and that is not unique to America. America suffers from cultural ignorance wholeheartedly. Yeah, no, that's the thing. But I would argue that it's not exclusive to America. I would definitely say parts of Europe suffer from that as well, and other countries as well, right? So we really have to think deeply and like really consider like globally what's going on. So that's what makes me say that. Okay, so we are we've been past the hour, so we'll if nobody has anything else they want to say. In conclusion, it's best to always learn and study about different cultures so that we become thoughtful, sophisticated, and evolved. Yeah, that's cool. It's cool to study different cultures. Yeah. And I would argue like but yeah, studying cultures, actually like doing an academia style, that's cool too. But I would just say like, hey, just talk to somebody from a different culture. Like, go online, go to like a foreign language exchange app, and just talk to people who live in different areas than you. Here in America, we can even we could just do that, right? Because America is different. We got the West Coast, which is quite different from the American South, which is, the Midwest of America is a different culture than the Northeast, New York, all that New England area, quite different culture. I've learned so much because I'm from California, and I moved here to the American South. And it's different, man. It's like, it's almost, there's some similarities though, sure. But it's different, man. So even just that, or let's say you live in Europe, you live in the UK and you're like, hey, maybe I should go to France talk to some French people. Not too far away. I think they're connected by a tunnel. You can take a tunnel. You can learn a lot. So that's true. Or, so forth and so on. But I just want to thank everybody for tuning in today. And hopefully we can go in we can do a live stream next week. That would be cool. I think I did cut out a few times. But I think I figured out the internet situation. So hopefully that technical difficulties won't happen again. And I'll have to listen back to this live stream to see how good this microphone sounds and if it's even worth it to keep holding it like this, or should I just use my cheaper headphone mic? I don't know. I know my cheap headphone mic, I sound really nasally and as if I'm on a phone, because it literally is like a web conference mic. Very cheap. So I would think this would sound better, but we'll see. See you later. Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in. Tune in next time for more philosophical thought.